sounds like
What you doing, Grandma?
What am I doing? I'm doing the washing.
What you doing there, Grandpa?
I'm just doing everything that has to be done. We were living in a farm on Highland, and it was a cold winter, and we knew the next day was Christmas, and my brother and I said, let's wake up in the middle of the night and catch Santa Claus. Well, we didn't catch Santa Claus, but there were a lot of presents around the tree. So we went over, because we had ordered some BB guns, Red Ryder BB guns. And so we were fumbling around there, and we hear something drop on the floor, tickle, tickle, tickle. It's BB shot all over the floor. I think we got the BB guns. We better pick up these so this kid, that Dad won't know that we've been in here. But we didn't get all the BBs. But we pretended to be greatly surprised in the morning. It was fun. It was a good place to live.
Did your dad notice some of the BBs the next morning?
He really did. He's got such a sharp eye. We thought we'd gotten them all. It was while we were on the farm. I'll tell you one more little story. We go out to where Dad is irrigating. He's raising a lot of wheat and all that here. So it's all approaching dinner time. He says, "Why don't you kids run and tell your mother to fix some dinner?" And we said yes. And he said, Wallace said, "Well, could we have fried chicken?" And he said yes, but you'll have to catch them. "How many shall we get?" He said, "Well, whatever you can catch," because we're little tiny kids, and we figured he'd never catch them. So we caught a few chickens, and Irene would hold the chicken over the chopping block, and Wallace would come down with the axe and kill the chicken. And then finally Mother noticed us out there, and she said, "What are you children doing? Dad says we could have fried chicken for dinner." So what do we have? Irene insists that we killed 23 chickens that day.
23.
Wow.
I think it was a little less, but you know, as you remember things, it kind of grows. It's like fish, they get bigger and bigger. I'm in about the 3rd or 4th grade. I have a real buddy. At school, we're always playing together. My buddy finds out, or tells me that he has a birthday party coming up. And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And I wondered, and so the little kid, you know, "Did you ask me to come?" And he said, "Well, no, I didn't." But he said, "Why don't you come over to the birthday party anyway?" So, being just a dumb kid, I'd trudge over there, and I get to the house, and his mother looks down at me, and she said, "Now, who is this?" And he told him, and she said, "Well, we didn't invite him, did we?" "No." "Well, I guess I'll have to fix him something." So she makes a salad. She takes a scoop of mayonnaise, plops it on the top, and says, "Here." And I felt that I had to eat it, and I have never liked mayonnaise since.
Because he felt and he knew that he wasn't wanted. Isn't that
Yeah.
awful?
Grandpa, I don't like mayonnaise either.
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I don't
horrible
eat it.
stuff. It makes me sick inside, even though I know I should.
My mother, she was really great because she taught us how to cook, how to sew, how to clean house, how to do everything. I remember one time, and I always wanted to learn how to cook. I always wanted to just be a good mother and a wife, and I thought that's all that women were supposed to do, you know, in those days. But anyway, I remember one time I was making candy, and it didn't turn out a bit good. And I had to throw it out, and I was so upset because I knew Mother was going to be real mad at me because I had wasted sugar. So when she came home, I told her, and she says, honey, we all have failures. Don't worry about it. I just felt so good.
Tell her about her coming to the neighbors to bring you home.
Oh, I have a terrible, terrible habit of talking a lot. And Mother would send me somewhere, you know. She'd send me down to the neighbors to borrow a cup of sugar. And I wouldn't come back, and I wouldn't come back, and I wouldn't come back. Finally, she'd yell out there, Carol, you know. This one time I had a boyfriend that I really, really liked. And I decided...
How many boyfriends did you have?
I had all
Hundreds
kinds.
of them.
All
Had to
kinds.
beat them away with a switch.
But this one was really cute, so I decided to get off at his bus stop. And he had a sister that was about my age. So I got off at the bus stop, went in his house, stayed there, and it got later and later and later. You know, and I would just be so much fun talking and having fun. Finally, there was a knock came at the door, and it was my mother. She was very upset with me, and she had a long switch. So she said, you get home here right now. So I could run real fast. So I ran home as fast as I could, got in the dressing room, and crawled in bed before she got home. She was so, but I had a terrible habit of doing that. You know, never know when to come home.
Oh, that's funny.
But I love people. I love being around people, and so I love talking. And one thing I used to do too, and that is I never played with dolls. I never really played. I was always building something. So I would go out at the clothesline, and we'd have sheets and blankets, and I'd make rooms, and I'd make little houses and stuff. And so I was always building. My sisters would play with it, but I was always building. And so my motto was, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. And it's always been that way. But living at home, my mother was fun. My mother was so much fun. And one thing that she did, she used to sing to us all the time. She used to read to us. And she'd read, you know, like Anna Green Gables and Storm Country Polly and all those really neat books. She'd say, if you comb my hair, I'll read to you. And then she would sing. And what is interesting, too, is that I sang to my kids all kinds of songs. Now I hear my kids singing to their kids. And
What's that one that goes, Amasa woof, Amasa
Yeah, you
woof,
gotta sing
Amasa
that
woof?
Woof, 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 woof.
How does that, what is that?
Oh, it's a Norwegian song.
How does it go?
I really can't remember, but you cross your legs and you put a little kid on it, you know, and
Dancey, dancey, dokey may.
dancey, dancey, dokey may. I can't remember. Anyway, then you go, all a song, woof, all a song, woof, all a song, woof, 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 woof. But the songs that Mother sang, in fact, there was one song that she sang that I just loved, and I wished I could get all the words, but it's about a little boy who is trying to get on a train. He doesn't have any money. And he says, please, Mr. Conductor, don't take me off this train. The best friend I have in the world is waiting for me in vain. Expected to die any moment and maybe not live through the day. I wish to cry. I want to kiss Mama goodbye, sir, before she passes away. And every time Mother'd sing it, we'd all cry. And they would say, sing it again. And she'd sing it, and we'd all cry. But anyway, during the song, there's some people that put some money together so he can get on the plane or the train, and he can go and kiss his mama goodbye. So I love that one. And we'd always cry and cry our eyes out. Sing it again. Kissing.
That woman is very precious, beyond all. I would not be the man I am today had it not been for Carrie. When I married her, I discovered she was smarter than I, much better organized.
That I am.
I went to a MIA dance, and I really was with my best boyfriend's sister, because whenever I didn't have a date, he'd bring her along. But I danced all night with this pretty girl.
When did we meet the first time?
The first time, they moved into our ward, and she was about 10 years old, and she had ringlets down to here. prettiest thing you ever saw. I mean, she still is, but boy, I'll tell you. Then, in those days, they had Sunday school in the morning and sacrament meeting at night. And so I was a priest by then, and sitting right in front of the sacrament table was the Sunday school class in which my dear wife was sitting. And she'd flirt with the guys at the sacrament table.
Is that true, Grandma?
Yes, I flirted with the bishop's wife and with him.
Bishop's
bishop's
son.
I mean,
Why?
the bishop's son. The
Yeah.
bishop's son. He was kind of a cute guy.
Yeah.
So I looked at both of them, flirted at, and how you smile. And
Yeah.
And so the bishop's wife's, bishop's son, you got me too.
yeah.
He said, she's a very pretty girl. And in the back of my sneaky mind, I thought, I'm going to ace him out.
So we saw each other off and on, at church and things like that, but we really didn't do anything until it was on January the 5th, and they had a New Year's Eve dance at the old Mill Creek Ward.
And you danced and danced.
And so we danced and danced and danced, and I kept thinking, oh my gosh, he's dancing with me. And I wasn't a very good dancer. I'm too stiff. But he's a very, very good dancer. In fact, he used to be a dance instructor for the ward. And they taught people how to dance, and they danced out at Black Rock.
No, we went to Salt Air in that
Air.
big ballroom, and there must have been 1,200 people there. And I had to dance with the other dance instructor who was
Eileen Parker, Eileen
Yeah,
Park or something
Parks. And her
She didn't
mother
like me.
kind of thought she would throw us together. But I still had my eye on this girl here.
So where did it go from there?
like that. In fact, he went home that night and he said, Mom, I've met the girl I'm going to marry. So, and then we kind of dated off and on. And
See, at that time I had a policy, never to date the same girl 2 times in a row. That way I'll pass my beauty and expertise around. Because I was, real smooth and...
so anyway, then we started dancing, but he didn't have a car, or started dating. Our dates were dances. In fact, on Tuesday night we'd go to Mill Creek Ward. No, we went to Murray First Ward, and after the Mutual. And then on Fridays we'd go out to Taylorsville. On Saturdays we'd go to the old Sandy Drag. And so we danced all the time, or else we'd go to movies, and that was dating. And then eating was at the old Dewdrop Inn on 39th South and State, and have old hamburgers and stuff like
And
that.
they finally made
But he didn't have a car.
a Kentucky Fried Chicken, that Dewdrop Inn.
Wasn't that the first Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Yeah.
at
That
Grand
was the
Salt
very
Lake?
first one, and he borrowed $100 from his brother, Morris Harmon. And they got started at the Dewdrop Inn. And then he expanded, and he became very, very wealthy.
How long before when you started dating until you got married, and how did you
It was
decide
about-
to get married?
How do we decide to get married? How do you ever decide to get married?
Oh, Grandma, how old were you when you guys met?
Well, I was about 15 when we really started liking each other.
And Grandpa, how old
You
were
see,
you?
at that time, they did not have a rule that you couldn't date till you were 16. There wasn't anything like that. I had a few dates even before that, because I had an old boyfriend, a really neat old boyfriend. But I couldn't go unless I took all my sisters. So I couldn't go alone. So I would go to the show with all my sisters tagging along behind. But then when I met Blaine and I got a little bit older, then I started dating. But we dated mostly with his sister Etta, because she was dating Stan Singleton, and he had a car.
So we go in
Yeah.
his car because that was better. Yeah, but one time we went with my buddy Hunter Coons, and we were in his old truck, and we had a flat tire. And so when we got home, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and her mother was out there with a big stick.
Out at the gate with a big switch.
She was going to beat me to a pulp. So anyway, I talked
flat
her out
tire,
of it.
sure.
But you have to tell her about those pillows. Why don't we put them in the picture?
I
Go
gotta-
get them.
Emily.
Emily,
two pillows
there's
right
two
here.
pillows there.
I had met a boy by the name of Ross Fulmer, and I thought he was so handsome and so gorgeous. That's before I met Blaine. And I thought I was in love with him. You know how your first love, you think is just wonderful. Well, for Christmas, and then then he went to, he was on USS West Virginia
He joined the Navy.
when it was bombed at Pearl Harbor. But anyway, so Christmas, he gave me some pillows. So he gave me this pillow. Well, I was dating Blaine at the time. Blaine saw it. The next day, Blaine gave me this pillow.
And you know, when the U.S. West
And I
Virginia
kept them all these years.
was bombed, he got off the ship okay and swam ashore, but he went back 3 times trying to find her picture,
And he couldn't
but
find
he
it.
couldn't find it.
You know, and I felt kind of bad because
Oh, I
I
did
really
too.
thought I liked him. But when I met Blaine, in fact, it was so funny because I came home and I said, "Oh, Mother, I really like Blaine Hall." And she said, "That red-headed, freckle-faced kid." So anyway, we felt, and then I really fell in love. And I felt real bad that I had to tell Ross, you know. But my name is tattooed on his chest. In fact, I gotta tell you this, I'll run and see who that is. This is so interesting because what happened is when Blaine had his 80th birthday, my sister Margaret called up and she said, "There's a lady in my ward that says, I know you and you don't know me, but you should know me better. Because I am the sister that my brother Ross had my mother name me after his girlfriend, which is your sister." So I had her come out to Blaine's 80th birthday. So I met her. We took pictures of each other. And so I said, "How's Ross?" You know, and everything. And he's doing just fine. I have not seen him since I married Blaine. And we've been married 60 years. And I'd like to see him sometime. I told Blaine, if I see him, I'm going to give him a hug and kiss. But you just remember that I will always love this red-headed, freckle-faced guy.
Oh, yes.
So after you first, when you got married, by the way, where did you get married?
In the Salt Lake Temple, 1942, on August the 28th. Now, I remember that. That's pretty good for
Hey,
me.
good job.
Your old man.
Now, Grandma, how old were you when you got married?
I was 18.
And Grandpa, how old were you?
21. I had a job with Western Airlines, and I thought it's time to get married. And,
Well, it was during the war, you know, and it was just
everybody was getting married.
we're getting married and stuff like that.
So, did you guys date for like 3 years? Or?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We dated off and on. I had a couple dates. In fact, I got to tell you this one date I had. He was a good-looking guy, but I guess he had a bad reputation, and I didn't know it.
It wasn't bad. It was awful.
So he asked me to go out, you know, and so anyway, so my mother said, "Now you're taking out this really special spirit, and I want you to bring her back the same way you take her out." Well, he took me to the dance. We didn't stay very long because he couldn't make much headway with me. So I came back, and Blaine was sitting on the front porch waiting for me.
I was going to make a decision that night. So I waited till he got back. She was okay.
So, Grandpa, how did you propose to her?
I went to her daddy and I said, "I'd like to marry your daughter." And he said, "Well, you're getting a good girl." He
You see,
okayed it.
my dad was very quiet. You know, you remember Grandpa, very, very quiet, very kind, real sweet.
And I
He
did
never
get a
said
good girl.
too much. So then Blaine
Gave her a ring that night.
gave me a ring, and I don't remember. You ever really? I mean, it was just one of those things you don't ask. It just all of a sudden.
We knew we were going to marry each other if we married anybody at all.
Then we went to California. We got married on Friday, and then he had to be to California on Monday morning.
Got to tell you about that. I got to work for Western Airlines. So I started school on Monday. We're learning about the airplane. Wednesday I went to the chief pilot and I said, "I got to have a few days off." And he said, "Well, you just came to work for us." "What do you mean you got?" I said, "We've been planning to get married on the 28th of August." So he let me off on Wednesday, We went up and got our blood test because in those days you had to have those before you could get married.
And a marriage license.
And a marriage license. Then we got married in the Salt Lake Temple on Saturday. A big reception that
Friday.
night.
It was Friday.
Oh yeah, it was Friday, wasn't it? So after a while, after the reception was over, we drove south, and we stopped at her uncle Kenneth, who was unable to go because he had to keep milking the cows. He had
At
about
Chester, Sanpete County.
where she was born, and he fixed us a wedding breakfast. We sat and talked to him. Then we drove down to Los Angeles through Zion's Park. And then we got there about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went to school on Monday morning.
What was interesting that after he learned to fly, which is such an interesting story how Grandpa got into it, and he was an instructor, so he instructed quite a few pilots, young men. And then his buddy said, you know, after the war, there's going to be so many instructors, we won't have a decent job. So he says, you know, Western's hiring. Why don't we go down and see if we can't get on? So they hopped on the plane and flew down. And you can tell them how your first...
Yeah, we met the chief pilot. He gave us a Czech pilot, took us up in a Boeing 247D, which is the first multi-engine airplane I'd ever been in, except as a passenger. And he had us fly around, demonstrate our expertise and ability, you know. Then he came down, he opened the chief pilot's door, stuck his head in. These guys are okay, hire them. And we had a job. But then we thought, well, we were running some classes back home. Bud had a Navy class and I had an Army class. We thought we really ought to, in all right, go back and finish the classes before we went with Western. We got back there to find that we had been replaced. 2 weeks later, the Labor Relations Board froze all pilots in their present duties.
To the end
So
of the
I
war.
missed it by 2 weeks, or I'd have been stuck there the whole war.
We're flying.
I always wanted to fly since I was 5 years old when I saw some barnstormers come out and land by the farm. So as I grew up, I kept dreaming about flying. And then when the Germans bombed Poland into submission in 3 days, the government of the United States realized they didn't have any pilots to speak of, nor instructors. So they set up a civilian pilot training program. If you were going to college, you could, for $40, get the ground school training and all the flight training to qualify you as a private pilot. They were going to get some people interested. But since we were poor, I mean real poor, I couldn't go to college. I took the entrance exams at the University of Utah and passed them very well, but there was no money. Dad had a bad heart. We were just barely surviving.
And your mother was working.
Yeah, it was tough coming out of the Depression. Anyway, I was riding with a fellow to my work in Salt Lake City when he finished a non-college phase of CPT. They out at West High School, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, would meet and do the ground school only. Then at the end of the ground school, they would give them a test, and the top 10 students in that group could then be given free flight training to qualify them to become a private pilot. Well, I decided to join that. There were 114 people in our class, which means 104 would be disappointed. I determined myself not to be the disappointed one. I was working at L.C. Smith and Corona typewriters and adding machines as an apprentice typewriter repairman. So when the lunchtime came, which was an hour long, the boys would generally go out and shoot a bit of pool. I took my manuals and sat at my desk and memorized them. At the end of the program, I got a 98.3%. I was number 6. It was a long test, took about 8 hours to do it all. Anyway, I now had flight training, and I've completed that course and had a private pilot's license. And then I got a card in the mail, letter, stating that they were taking the top 2 out of that 10, sending them to secondary training, Phoenix, Arizona.
He was one of the 2.
I was one of the 2 selected and went there and completed the course, came back with a commercial license and an instructor's rating. Went back to work instructing students, doing the thing I loved, and got paid for it. We were paid $150 a month and 1 hour for every hour we flew. So I made almost $300 one month.
How much for every hour you flew?
$1. So
Big deal, huh?
I flew a lot of time. At that time, I didn't know it was illegal to fly that much. But then we discovered that Western wanted pilots, and we went to work for them, Bud Hoagland and I.
But then during the war too, Western had an Army contract, and all the pilots were supposed to take 6 months at a time. He did it twice, and we went to Canada, and then he flew a lot of cargo and stuff.
We flew out of Edmonton and up north to Grand Prairie, Fort St. John's, Fort Nelson, Watson Lake, and on into Fairbanks. We also flew out to Nome, Point Barrow, and sometimes down to Anchorage. One time we spent 2 weeks flying into Seattle and back. But we were in military uniforms as civilians.
You flew out to Attu.
Oh yeah, I made 2 trips out to Attu. One time we got there 4 hours after the Japs bombed it. But all they did was the bulldozers leveled out the spots, and we went in and landed anyway. It was very interesting. And I have a little booklet of my flying experiences, which you've all read, I'm sure. I never lost my zeal for flying.
Every trip, every time he got ready for a flight, even when he was older, it was like you're getting cleaned up, ready to go to a party. He was so excited to go. So when he had to retire, he didn't like it very well. Because that was, he absolutely loved flying.
At one time, Carrie had an operation. And when she recovered, I took her over to Hawaii, just the 2 of us. We stayed at the Ala Moana Hotel. Next door were 72 shops and stores. And I said, honey, this is your day. I'm going with you. I'll stay with you as long as you want to shop. She went through all 72 stores, went back to the first store she'd entered and bought the thing she really liked. But now she knew it was what she really wanted.
Isn't that the way it goes?
yes.
You see, women enjoy shopping. Men don't. They like to buy it, bag it, and take it home.
There's one thing that and you probably heard about this before, that I don't know how I did it, but anyway, it was later on when he got older, and he was getting ready for a flight, and he had his uniform on, and I thought, oh, he is so cute. He's such a good man. He's been bishop, and he's such a good father and a husband, and I thought, I just gotta let him know I really love him. So I walked up to him, and I grabbed his tie, and I turned it, and I pulled him, and I says, remember, you're mine and nobody else's. Have a good flight.
So I fly over to Honolulu, and when we get to the hotel, it's midnight over there, so I was so enthralled by what she had done that I called her on the telephone. Tell her how much I appreciated that. And she said, do you realize it's 3 o'clock in the morning here? But she welcomed me anyway. We'd flown into Minneapolis. We stay there for about 2 hours. Then we fly down to Rochester, Minnesota, where there's a big health place down there. And then we'd fly back to Minneapolis and we'd be done for the day. It was stormy, snowing a little bit. Visibility was down fairly low, but you could still sneak in under it. So we fly down to Rochester. I make an approach, get underneath the clouds, and we're making a big circle around to go back and land on the runway into the wind. Well, on the way around this big circle, the buildings of Rochester are sticking up into the clouds. And I don't want to run through the town lower than the buildings. So I pulled up, we make another approach, and this time instead of landing into the wind, I'm going to land downwind on the short runway. But I'm going to get on the brakes and get it stopped. Well, it had rained first, and then it had about 6 inches of snow. So I got on the runway fairly close to the end and jammed on the brakes, and it felt like it was going faster because it was picking up the snow in front and the water below. It was hydroplaning. There was no braking at all. And I could see down at the end of the runway there was a big canal, and above the canal there were some high tension lines. And I was pretty well trapped, either going in the ditch or trying to fly under those high tension lines. And I didn't like either one, so I had an impression on a field of white exactly what I should do. And I reached down and hooked the tail wheel, jazzed the right engine, and just went around till I was going backwards down the runway. Then I jammed full power on, and it shook and shuddered and came to a stop. And I slid open the window and looked out. We had about 15 feet of runway left. And Jeannie Tipton came charging into the cockpit, and she said, "What are you trying to do? Kill us first?" Well, then the tower called about that time, so we just taxied in like it was every day. Parked the airplane. The Lord was with me that day.
You know, another thing that was really quite interesting, and that is there was several times that he had general authorities on his flight. And who was it that came one time and opened up the...
Well, it was Sunday, and I hated to fly on Sunday bid schedules where I didn't have to. We were going out about 10 o'clock at night, and we're running the checklist in the cockpit. Door opens. Ezra Taft Benson sticks his head in the cockpit. Says, "I want to see who's flying this airplane tonight." I said, "Bishop Hall, Thousand Oaks." And then he talked to us for a while. My first officer was a fan of Ezra Taft. He used to make speeches, you know. He'd go down and present patriotic types of things. And my first officer was a real fan of his. It made his whole day to just shake hands with him and talk to him.
One thing that was really quite interesting, and this is with your dad, that he was taking a courtship and marriage class at BYU. And so the professor says, "Would you have your parents come and we'll ask them a bunch of questions?" So we went, and they asked us a lot of questions, and then the professor said, "What is it, Miles, in your life that makes you so, you know, like a stable young man, and you seem to be, you know, pretty well adjusted?" And he said, "It's because I always knew my parents loved each other." And that's the main thing. You have to let your children know you love each other. And in fact, sometimes it was really funny because my kids went to BYU, they never called. They never called. And so I said to somebody, oh, they must be so glad to get rid of us. They never call. And this one lady said, it's because they know that everything is so stable at home that they don't need to. They know everything is all right. So they hardly ever called us, been paying attention to us. I felt bad. I thought, oh, they don't love us anymore. Communication. Communicate with one another. Blaine and I, we've had a little bit of problems with that because he's kind of quiet. He's gotten a little more noisy since he's gotten older. But you need to communicate with each other, talk to each other. In fact, the one thing that we've done recently, it's been really kind of fun. The Institute here in St. George, they have a courtship and marriage class, and we've been asked twice to go there. And they'll have a couple that's been married a year, 8 years, 20 years, and us.
60.
And we've had the people come up and just, ask us all kinds of questions. We have to answer, everybody has to answer questions. And it's been so fun to go. And we've had people come and just say, you never see that anymore, 60 years. And you love each other. We've been on 2 missions. We worked at the temple. It's almost about 15, 20 years we've worked at the temple. And I think if you do things for the Lord, love each other, and let your kids know you love them. Let your grandkids. And I'm the type of person, I just want to kiss and hug them all the time. I hear them on the phone, like Emily will call me and I'll think, oh, if you was here, I'd just kiss you and love you. You have to let them know. It doesn't hurt.
Have any of you remembered how often I throw my arms around you and say, you make the grandpa's heart happy?
That's right.
And during the time the kids were growing up, we made every attempt to be at every important occasion that they had. I missed some because of flying, but Carrie always kept them going.
The things that he did miss was childhood diseases, operations, all that kind of stuff. It was me alone.
Hey, I got there for the last of our 5 children.
Oh, yeah. I had all my children all by myself.
Really?
He was there for the last one. My mother was with me. My mother. But, it's just one of those things you have to put up with. When he had to fly, you had to fly.
And so sometimes, see, because I didn't drink, I got to fly on Christmas and New Year's, because some of the other guys weren't able to resist.
And they always trusted Blaine that they knew that he would,
I remember one time we had a 5-day trip and I had to go over Christmas, and so we had at our house Christmas 3 days early, and we locked the kids in the house and didn't let them out because
let anybody know that Christmas had already come, Santa Claus. So you need to do little things like that once in a while to because sometimes you get so wrapped up with your children and you forget that, he's came first before they did. So every once in a while I do some little things just to remind him.
I'll tell you one thing that cemented it. When I was a bishop, I was flying half the time, and when I was home, I was doing bishop work. One day, Carrie, go ahead.
I felt kind of sorry for myself because he was busy all the time, and I thought, oh, we never have time to talk or anything. And so he was sitting at his desk. I went in there and I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, I think I need an interview with my bishop. He was my bishop. So
I said, what do you want?
So we decided that we would take at least a few hours, at least once a week, just for us. And so what we'd do, we'd go down to the beach, down in Malibu.
Mm-hmm. You have to get in the car and get away from the house because the phone will ring. So we go down to the beach, and the little restaurant on stilts that was right along the shore. And we watched the birds and the ducks who were diving. And we talk about the kids and what we needed to do.
That way, the kids weren't there, nobody was there, it was just us. And we just did it once a week. It'd be different days, whatever.
Whenever we could work it in.
Something that would, but I think being together, I know people that say, oh, I just can't wait to go on a trip with my girlfriends. Oh, I keep thinking, why not go with your husband? It's just fun to be together. And I do like friends. I've always had to have a close friend. Somebody that I can bellyache to, you know, and they still love me.
This is a
I can
girlfriend, and
complain
she's
and they
always
still
had
love
it.
me.
Yeah, she's got one right over here. Calls her all the
In
time.
fact, she called me this morning and she says, Carrie, it was Eris. She says, I just wanted to let you know that you're just so wonderful in my life. I'm so glad I met you, and I want you to have a happy Thanksgiving.
Cute.
She was right behind.
You know, when I was bishop, I had a philosophy. We don't want to do it unless it's fun. So we figured out a way to make home teaching fun. And you know how you make it fun? You do it every time. And that if you get to love your people, then it's fun to go there and visit them. If you go grudgingly, it's the hardest job on the face of the earth. So in our house, we've tried to make it fun.
Yeah, I've tried to make it fun. I've always been a type of person who liked to kid and tease and stuff like that, you know. Like this one time, I remember that everybody had gone except Colleen. She was still the last one, and I was in the foyer and she was in the room, and I said, Colleen! And she came, looked down. I said, come here this instant. And she goes, what's the matter? I said, I just want to tell you I loved you. And she goes, oh. Then I heard her call her girlfriend, guess what my mother just did? I had a friend, or I had a couple that moved into our ward. And I was working in the Relief Society. I was in Relief Society presidency. And they asked me to go into Mutual because they were having problems in Mutual. And so she took my place in Relief Society where we're getting ready to have a bazaar. Well, and she didn't know too much about it, so every time something would happen, they'd say, well, go to Carrie. Carrie Hall knows it. She got to where she did not even want to even hear my name.
Harry.
So what I did, I knew that she didn't like me, so I made up my mind she was going to like me. She didn't have to be my true friend, but I was going to be her friend. She wrote me a letter one time and she says, I found out the beam's been in my eye and not yours. So if there's anybody that I know that doesn't like me, I'm just nicer to them. Because they don't have to love me. But anyway, that's the way I am.
The main thing is to remember who you are, because that's where your strength comes from. And they can only be difficult to a certain point. So I can ignore that quite easily and go on and make them my friend. It's easier that way.
How many clocks do you have?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's about 30 in just this room here. I don't know. In fact, I've never gone out just hunting for clocks. In fact, my grandmother had a clock that I always liked because I think clocks are very soothing. I don't know. They just make you feel really, really at home.
What time is it right now?
What time is it right now? Well, what clock should I look at?
Take your pick.
And it's kind of hard to get them all together because I'll put them all together and everything, but one will go a little bit faster, one will go a little bit slower, and you never can get them. But it's kind of fun because when they go off, they'll go off one, then another, you know, and for a little few minutes they're all going off. I like jewelry. I've always liked jewelry. I used to play with my mother's jewelry. Never played with dolls, but I played with jewelry. I like creating. I'm always thinking of something, and, you know, and my problem is I think everybody wants one too. You know, and I'll say, oh, are you sure you don't want another tassel? Are you sure you don't want this or something? No, I think I've got enough. Because when I make it, I just get so excited. I want everyone to have one too.
We may already have enough pillows.
In fact, I have a friend, and I said, yeah, every time I come, they'll say, Jiggers, get out, always carry stuff, so she thinks I like it. You have a very strong testimony. I think the reason why I have strong testimony because my mother was so close to the Savior. My mother was she was given a blessing to have, you know, close connections with the other side. And so we used to talk about Christ. We used to talk about the Lord. And so to me, it was just like, that was my friend. I knew him. And I've never doubted I've never doubted ever in my whole life. The Book of Mormon, I bet I've read it 60 times. When you're at the visitor center, you take people on tours. And then at the very last room, they had a holographic projection of a Moroni. And so you were, after the whole thing, you had about 4 or 5 different rooms to go to. Then you would say, I have put this promise to a test, like, Moroni 10:4, and I know that it's true. And then people would take their cards out and sign it. But I thought to myself, I've never put it to a test. Well, why should I? I believed it. I don't doubt it. But it bugged me because I could not say, I have put this to a test and I know it's true. Because I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I don't have to. I already know it. Well, one day Blaine was taking a tour, because we alternate tours, and he was taking a tour. And I went into, they had a study room. I went into the study room, put the Book of Mormon down. I sat down and I picked up the Book of Mormon like this. And all of a sudden, it lit up. Sparks flew all over the place. It was just, I went, oh my, and I put it in my lap and I was crying. And I turned the leaf and I said, it's true. It really is true. And it just was the most wonderful. It just went all through my body. And it was the most wonderful thing. I can't even explain how really wonderful it was. And I kept thinking, oh, it's just like the golden plates are here. And I turned the pages and everything. And then all of a sudden, it just all went away and quit. So when I got the next tour, I said, not only do I believe the Book of Mormon to be true, I know it is true. I had so many people pick up their cards, look at me, and sign it. And we called them Goldens, and we gave them to the full-time missionaries. And I thought to myself, it was, the Lord knows you. You don't have to say anything, because in my mind I kept thinking, I don't have to. But the Lord knew my feelings. He knew me inside. He just wanted to give me the confirmation that it is true.
Wow.
And that's what I had.
Thanks for sharing that.
But anyway, I know the gospel's true. I know it with all my heart. And it's, I don't know, I think it's something my parents instilled in me that, and then the more it's instilled in you, you want to read about it, you want to find out about it, till you believe it, and there's just no doubt. There has never been a doubt. I just know with all my heart that the gospel's true. You have a warm, wonderful feeling. In fact, one time Karen was really cute. The teacher at school said to her, well, how do you know the gospel's true? And Karen says, how do you know you love your mother? Mm-hmm. So it's just something that's just down deep inside. And you want all your kids to feel the same way, and sometimes they're not going to always do it. But the best thing to do is you love your kids, let them know you love them, and let them know that you know the gospel's true, and do a lot of praying.
I have a very firm testimony of everything that has happened, miraculous, that God is our Father in heaven, that Jesus Christ is His Son, that Joseph Smith was truly a prophet of God, that the Book of Mormon could not have been brought forth anyway except through the gift and power of God, that the church is true, and the prophet who leads it today is just as much a prophet as the prophets in the Old Testament. There's no doubt in my mind, and I really feel that if everything I had was required, I would give it. No question in my mind.
You love bread.
And that's not very fattening.
Yes. Hello, sweetheart. Isn't she pretty?
Pretty ugly.
Can you imagine an old 82-year-old man falling in love with this girl every day?